So if you think of your role as an OD consultant, I think it's important to put this in context. Francois began the evening tonight giving us some context of the roles that you might play. I also was thinking about some of the work that Jervis Bush has done around explaining the version of OD work that is diagnostic and the work that is dialogic. So, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if I think about the macro system, we might come in and we might do assessments. Might even do assessments on how conflict competent is this organization? What is the history of conflict in this organization? What conflicts end up with lawyers? What's the cost of conflict? So there's a lot of diagnostic work that can be done in the area of conflict resolution. But tonight I'm really talking more about the micro level. So if you are invited to host a conversation around conflict, you are probably working on an interpersonal relationship or a conflict in teams. So that's where I'm pitching this tonight. In the role of conflict resolution, we're often asked to sort out what's the truth, right? And you can get it that there might be one version of the truth that is the truth. But my work in conflict, I say, there is your version of the truth, Teresa, and Camille, your version of the truth, and both are valid, right? But really, at the end of the day, at the end of a conflict conversation, I might not even really care about the truth, because what I care about is what's important. And you really care about what's important, but you also want to know that I accept your version of the truth, because I'm not there to decide who's telling the truth. So here are some premises that I am going to suggest. That conflict is inevitable. Right? If somebody says to us that I don't have conflict in my life or there's no conflict in my organization, I'm going to suggest that you're not alive, or the conflict is, or the organization is highly dysfunctional, to say that it has no conflict. That conflict is actually a byproduct of being engaged. Somebody once said to me that the opposite of love is not hate, but indifference. If you care enough, you will say what you think, and it may end up in a conflict. But to not be engaged and not put what matters to you on the table, to not take that risk, is to not be engaged. And conflict is a clash of interests or needs. And who among us has not had a conflict, right? Because we are navigating our interests that compete with other people's interests all the time. So the thing about if conflict is going to be a transformational act, you have to view it as an opportunity for richer, more honest relationships, right? So what are we going to get out of this conversation that will take us to a new level? And some people may come to the table with not good integrity, and that happens. It's not going to go anywhere. And not all conflict ends, people singing Kumbaya. And that's just a reality, and you deal with that too. But if you create the space for there to be some honest learning, and it's about creating a safe space, the possibility is planted. So, if you are asked to resolve a situation, a conflict, you might be asked to mediate, arbitrate, and I'm sure that a lot of you aren't asked to do this, but these are the different ranges of ways to resolve conflict. And I've asterisked mediation because I think that is probably the most likely role that you'd be asked to play, or to teach people about mediation. So arbitrating is making decisions for people, and then you do assume that you have the truth. So I made some assumptions that if conflict is to be an opportunity for transformation, there are a few prerequisites that have to be in place. And so you might say, well, what if they aren't in place? Because they aren't always in place. That just means there's a lot more work to do. So ideally, in an organization that is a learning organization that's embraced that notion of we are an organization that values personal mastery, that we value learning, and we value conflict competence. We want people to learn to handle their own kinds of conflict. That makes your role as a host real easy. The work of Bush and Folger Baruch Bush and Joe Folger wrote this book called The Promise of Mediation. The Promise of Mediation. But the essence of it is that the focus is not on settlement, the focus is on the process. And that's really hard for some of us to deal with, to say that, what do you mean we're going to walk into a room and we're going to have a mediation and we're not going to get to a resolution? The reality is that even though you don't focus on a resolution, the job of the mediator, you as host, is to empower the parties, to voice their interests, to voice their desires, and to encourage recognition across the table, across that triangle. So the job is for you to own the process loosely and allow the outcome to be owned by the parties. So transformative mediation is really about, again, hosting a dialogue between parties in conflict where you are extremely facilitative. The transformative model assumes a couple things. One is that the parties have done some pre-work. There's some conversation that's gone on ahead of time to acquaint them to this process, which is a little different, and to prime them for being open, trusting, and you as the mediator engage them in some process of invitation. And the process is really critical, right? And it's, even though, as I said, you're not focusing on ending with a resolution, the resolution happens. So another way to look at the transformative model is to think of mediation on a continuum. And the directive model, problem-solving model, is more of what the JI teaches. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's actually I've been in mediations where I'm doing the transformative model, and the parties say, "But you're not helping. And I need you to step in." And I say, my response is, how do you want to show up there? How do you want to step up? And I then empower them. I help them find their own strength to do it. Because if I do it, it's not them, right? And in the process of engaging in this mediation, they're actually learning. They're learning to be conflict competent. If I do all the work for them, they're going to walk out of there maybe with a piece of paper that says, "I agree to this." No wiser for the wear, right? So if there is one tool that is most critical for building transformation, for creating transformation, being an agent for change, it's language. And that goes back to the whole notion that we work in social relationship to other people in our communities, in our organizations, and that language is how we connect with people. The other two conversations that I'm going to touch on tonight are the possibilities conversation and the commitment conversation. And to have these conversations well, you have to be able to design really good questions. And I think that is the other, the transformation tool, transformation being language, what you really want to sharpen in your language toolbox are how to ask good questions. And that's what I do in mediation. I ask more questions. I don't have the answers, I have the questions. And that's where the power is. So I like this, what Peter Block says, is that invitation counters the conventional belief that change requires mandate or persuasion. So again, if you are working in an organization where people have been sent to the table, you're going to have to work really hard to make that invitation not feel onerous, right? Because you're inviting them, but there is no invitation they're being required to show up. But you do have the opportunity to invite them to participate, right? They're being sent to the room, but you can invite them to open up. So maybe that's where the work should be.